I would like to invite up one of the members of our organizational team, and a man really who needs no introduction, but I'll give him just a brief personal one. And it's the great Ron Hansen. And I think if you remember, I do anyway, there was a book that came across my radar that was, and I hate to be trite or cliche here, but it was a game changer. A post-conciliar book that kind of was not Edwin O'Connor or was not Flannery O'Connor, as good as those books are. It was Ron Hansen writing about a mystical experience and stigmata, which was not a metaphor as far as I could tell, right? And it was Married in Ecstasy, which kind of was a game changer, and then Ron came back with Atticus not long after, and so many other good things besides. I got to hear Ron speak in Berkeley with my wife Margie. I think it was Atticus maybe at Moe's Books. Does that sound right, Ron? But Ron is a cherished member. He agreed. Ron usually does plenaries, but Ron is doing something, I think, more this time. He's going to honor his good friend Paul, and then he's going to serve as homilist on Sunday at Mass. So that's going to be really good. So without further ado, please welcome to the podium Ron Hansen.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, especially to salute my friend Paul Mariani. I think I first met him in 1980 at the Bread Loaf Writers Conference in Vermont. I had already browsed the bookstore and saw his first book of poems, Timing Devices, and he also had a book, biography of William Carlos Williams, A New World Naked. And I thought I should meet this guy. And for some reason, there were all kinds of people in the Treeman, which is kind of the party place, and he was talking to other people, but finally he kind of sidled over to me and said in kind of CIA mode, I heard you're Catholic. And I allowed that I was, warily. And he said, well, tomorrow is the Feast of the Assumption. You want to go to Mass in Middlebury with me? And I didn't have a car, so I said, yeah. And that became, over the years, we continued at Bread Loaf as staff associates, then full-time staff. And it became a regular thing on Sundays to go to Mass with Paul and Eileen and the sons. And I remember one time, he just reminded me of it last night. We were sitting there, and it was time for the collection to come down. And so everybody was getting their money out, and he noticed I didn't take my wallet out. I'd already given it, my own parish. But he slipped me $1 like I was a 4-year-old child, and I put that in the collection plate. But that's a kind of prank that I'm familiar with Paul. There are so many hilarious times I've had with him, both at Bread Loaf in that kind of pastoral, magical place, but at his home in Montague, in New York. We were in Dublin for a Hopkins conference once, and he introduced me to the idea of a dirty martini, which I'd never heard of before, and that's the only way I drink martinis now. After those 2 books I saw of his, I went and read his commentary on the poems of Gerard Manley Hopkins, who is also, I'm a fan of his as well. And I was blown away. I think this was the first major commentary on Hopkins. And then one book followed another, way too fast. It was hard for us slower writers to catch up. But it was not only wonderful poetry, but he wrote, I think, 6 biographies of, the first one was Williams, Berryman, Lowell, Hart Crane, Wallace Stevens, and Hopkins. And the New Harmonium is the most recent one about about Wallace. I keep wanting to say Wallace Shawn. That's not him at all. And in addition to that, he had, I think, 8 books of poems now, the most recent being The Ordinary Time, infused with the Catholic imagination. I think it's almost like a textbook of what the Catholic imagination is and could be. And in addition to that, he's been writing, I think, 6 books of criticism and of essays, the most recent being The Mystery of It All. I almost called it The Wonder of It All. It's a wonder that you produce all this, but it's The Mystery of It All, this wonderful book of essays. And what he's done all this while living a life as a full-time teacher, having 3 sons. He's worked very much in his Catholic parish and has been with the Cursillo movement for something like 20 years, 40 years. So that's just astonishing, that dedication. And so for me, he's the amalgam of what a Catholic writer should be, a person who's immensely prolific, dogged in his research for his biographies, which are, it's wonderful for one person to have written one biography. It's almost unimaginable to do the biographies that Paul has done, to work up all those different subjects. Like Robert Caro has done 3 books of Lyndon Johnson, but that's all he's done for 20 years. Paul has had to work up all these different subjects. So it's not just his poetry that's so wonderfully Catholic. I think it's the way he's addressed poetry in the early part of the 20th century, taking in all the major figures, many of them who were Catholic, or at least cultural Catholics, but also all the poets who influenced him so much in his life. So a passionate teacher, a magical writer, an enthralling person to be with. I'm so pleased to honor Paul with a Flannery O'Connor Lifetime Achievement Award. His work is as captivating and redemptive as hers was. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron Hansen. Beautiful, majestic. Thank you so much for the warm greeting of your dear friend. I'd like to invite up now Father Paul Mariani from the Society of Jesus, who will say a couple of words about his father. Please welcome Paul Mariani.
Well, it's truly an honor for me to be here tonight. So a couple years ago, my dad had his retirement gathering at Boston College, but this is the first time I'm able to kind of publicly say something about my father in such a large and incredible crowd of people here tonight. So I want to honor my father, and I think that's in the commandments, isn't it, somewhere? And honor my mother as well, who is here. Oh, say again? Can you hear it? Oh, I'm like that? Wow, technology. It's great when it works, right? Okay, there we go. So also my mother and father and my brothers who also went into education as well. So for Jesuits, we often use this term, the cura personalis, which is the care of the person. And I think that was modeled to me at a very young age when I was about 4 or 5, and we had a annual town festival. And I remember my dad there. I was about 5 years old, and looking up, and my dad was speaking to these giants, right? These people in their 20s or 18 or 19 years old. And I was just struck, not so much by what he was saying, but that he obviously had a great care or concern for these local youth there in Western Massachusetts. And I was trying to figure, were they part of his catechism class, or were they high school graduates? Would they be going on to college the next year? Would they be drafted to fight in Vietnam? Who were these people? And yet my dad kind of engaged them at a very one-on-one level, and maybe, one might drift off a little bit and turn away, and he'd engage them again. So I think at a young age, I just saw that my dad, sure, he was a teacher, a writer, a scholar, but he also cared deeply about education and educating youth of all backgrounds, all income levels, rural or city, no matter what. He'll tell you stories about how he taught the great Serpico at one point too, but that is all part of it. So I really want to just honor my father for modeling to me what it is to be a teacher and a writer. And some people ask me over the years, they say, who was the first Jesuit that you met? And I have to tell them the first Jesuit I met was Gerard Manley Hopkins, which is true because my dad was writing that book in his 20s and I was just a young toddler or infant. And so the first Jesuit I met, in fact, I remember When I was 11, we went to Wales, and there's a beach there that Father Hopkins would walk and take meditative strolls. Well, interestingly enough, it's kind of become a honky-tonk workers' paradise type beach, and yet there was my dad walking up and down the beach trying to recreate the young Hopkins. Meanwhile, there's a Ferris wheel in the background and going on and on. So, yes, the first Jesuit I met was Father Hopkins. So I very much want to express my love and gratitude and support for my father and for my mother here tonight. It means a great deal for me for having you invited me to be up here, and I thank you all for being present. Thank you.
I'd like to ask our organizational team to please come up and help us honor Paul. So Dana and Paul Contino, please come. Paul, please come on up. Jessica, we're going to make a circle around Paul. You know what? Actually, please have a. Paul's going to say a couple words. Yeah, then we're going to give you the award. Okay. So wait one sec. Sorry, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron and Paul, for your wonderful and heartfelt introductions. Does this work? It is. Really close. You're going to be like a close talker. Like this? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And a profound thank you to all those who have chosen to bestow on me this extraordinary Lifetime Achievement Award. That my name should in some way be linked with the name of Flannery O'Connor, a writer and a woman and a saint, is something that I am still trying to get my head around. To tell you the truth, I hope to be hanging onto her splendiferous robe when I meet St. Peter at those pearly gates, trying to squeeze through before one of those 20-foot winged bouncers stoop to muscle me out. And that's when I will try to explain that I'm a friend of Flannery's now, and flash them my award, notarized the 19th of September, 2019. And as I look out at the faces in front of me tonight, I keep thinking of so many of you who have been inspirations for me over the years. And this is the tricky part, of course, because for as many as I will name, there are many others as well, and I hope they will know who they are. But let me give names to some of those faces. First of all, there's Eileen, my wife of 56 years, who has read and commented on so many of my writings over the years, beginning with typing my college papers and then my dissertation on her portable typewriter all those years ago, and who always gives me sound advice, and who, if in the audience, knows when to cut me off with a hand crossing below her chin, left to right, as if to say, "That's enough, dear." And my oldest son, Paul, the Jesuit priest who teaches Chinese history and who flew in from the University of Santa Clara to be here with me, and who holds the Edmund Campion Chair in History and works with the Chinese Catholic community in San Jose and serves as chaplain for Santa Clara's basketball and rugby teams. And then there's Ron Hansen, of course, my dear friend and a colleague of Father Paul's at Santa Clara, and who's reading from his Mariette in Ecstasy back at Breadloaf in, I think, 1990, made all the difference for me. Here he was, before that wide-ranging audience of every imaginable background and belief, reading about a woman in upstate New York who receives the many-sided gift of the stigmata and bears witness to a group of people who respond in every way possible from unbelief to awe and even to jealousy. Why her and not me? What's so special about her? That sort of thing. But the effect on me was profound because I thought to myself that it was time for me too to start witnessing to a deeper, sacramental reality, which had in fact been the vital underlying river coursing through my own life ever since I could remember. And then there's Greg Wolfe, who reached out to me about the same time as he cobbled together the first issue of Image Journal and asked me for a poem, which I was delighted to do. Image, founded in 1989 to, quote, demonstrate the continued vitality and diversity of contemporary art and literature that engage with the religious traditions of Western culture. A dramatic, not didactic art, an art that was incarnational, not abstract. Over the years, Greg and his dedicated staff were there for me, not only by publishing my poems and essays in subsequent issues, but by giving me the opportunity to meet a great community of artists and offer poetry workshops to some extraordinary folk. First in Colorado Springs, then in Santa Fe, Whidbey Island, and even Mount Holyoke, just 20 miles down the road from where I live. And then, too, there were the editors at America magazine, especially Brother Joe Hoover, where I once served as poetry editor. And there's the indefatigable Angela Alaimo O'Donnell, who knows her Flannery, and with whom I've been able to connect, along with her husband Brennan, president of my alma mater, Manhattan College, on so many occasions. And the versatile, constantly surprising Mary Gordon and Richard Rodriguez and Trish Hampel and Alice McDermott, whose novels based on the Irish Catholic communities of Brooklyn and environs still haunt me with their tough, elegiac music. And to the mix, the poetry of Larry Joseph and Phil Meters and James Matthew Wilson and Fannie Howe. Add to Marianne Miller and Susan Miller and Catherine and Toby Wolfe and Paul Contino and Anthony Domestico and Nick Repatrizone and Paul Eli's The Life You Save May Be Your Own, with its nod again to Flannery. And Dana Gioia, whose essays leave me asking how anyone could write about so many poets and do it so dazzlingly. And a special nod to Mike Murphy for seeing me through the myriad steps of getting up here on the stage, step by step, however stumblingly. And Father Mark Bosco with his Flannery, a must-see film. And many more, of course, as one thinks back to the too brief timeline we are all given, ars longa vita brevis. And I know, too, that other names will be added as I walk these halls over the next few days, and then return home with new riches to plunder and think about and be altered by, like you and you, my friends, here in this special Pentecostal moment of our Catholic literary revival. Thank you.
Please hang around for a second, Paul. And please, org team, come on up and let's honor our friend. Ron Hansen will read the citation.
The inaugural Flannery O'Connor Lifetime Achievement Award, presented to Paul Mariani, poet, biographer, educator, at the 3rd Biennial Catholic Imagination Conference at Loyola University Chicago, for exceptional contributions to the field of arts and letters and for gracing our world with much needed beauty. Thank you.
Special blessing upon you, Dad, for all your fine work over the years. May the Holy Spirit continue to guide you and bless you all the days of your life. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Our org team's going to stay here for a photo op. Everybody else, please do as you will. We'll start as close to 7:30 as possible. Thanks very much.